Human smuggling gangs are beginning to target Canada because they increasingly believe our system can be exploited for profit. This is simply not good for Canada, and it is grossly unfair to the tens and tens, hundreds of thousands who patiently come through the proper process.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper, during the election campaign, trying to get support for his bid to crack down on human smuggling. Of course, not everyone is on board with that. Not everyone's on board with the changes that have made our immigration system more successful for Canada and for immigrants themselves. Joined now in Toronto by Luame Kidane. She is an organizer with No One Is Illegal, an activist group that calls for an end to deportations and detentions and a much more open immigration system. Luame, would that be a fair description of your organization?
Yes.
So your organization, is it almost calling for open borders, that you don't want an immigration system at all? Because you are active in saying that we need to allow more, we need to just allow illegal immigrants full status in Canada.
Well, one, I would contest your use of the word illegal. What we're calling for here is the respect for human dignity, that at the core of the way that we relate politically and the way that we relate to each other is not based on profit or any other factor besides the fact that humans are meant to be treated with respect and dignity. And so because of that, that's why the name of the organization is No One Is Illegal. So at the very start of the question that you're asking me, I would contest your use of the word illegal.
Well, we can call it whatever they want. I think your term would be undocumented people, but they got into Canada by breaking the law. Canada would consider them illegal immigrants, and your group's objective is to say, let everybody in. Is it an open, complete open borders society that you want, rather than the current system where you apply to come here, you're graded on points and whether you'll be able to integrate, find a job, and so on?
Well, again, I realize that you're trying to have the conversation, but in order for us to have a conversation, we need to agree on the terms that are being used. Again, you're saying that people are coming in and breaking the law. Like we said, and we continue to say, is No One Is Illegal, and in collaboration with a lot of other groups as well throughout Toronto and Turtle Island, we recognize that justice often has nothing to do with whether it's legal or illegal. And so what we're calling for, again, is for a basic demand for human rights, policies based on dignity and respect. And so because of that, we call for an end to racist immigration policies. And like I said as well at the beginning, No One Is Illegal is a migrant justice organization, but we also stand firm that Canada is an occupying state on colonized land, that this Turtle Island is Indigenous territory, and so we stand in solidarity and support the fight for Indigenous sovereignty.
Okay, let me stop you there. You're saying that this is Canada's an occupied land and that this is Indigenous territory. So I'm white, you're black. Should you and I go back to wherever our homeland is and just leave this to the native population?
See, you're taking something that I've said and turning it into a matter of race.
No, I'm asking you a legitimate question.
I would kindly like for me to be able to answer your question. So what you've said to me just now is based on factors of race. What we're talking about is respect for the land that we're on. Coming into a territory, what we believe is that you can refuse to be a settler in that you resist the occupation of Turtle Island, that you stand in solidarity with the fact that Canada is an occupying nation, that because of that, in conjunction with that, also implements racist immigration policies that target people from the global south. And oftentimes the displacement that's happening from the global south is happening as a result of exploitative policies that Canada implements throughout the world.
Okay. Let's get back to the opening question. Do you believe in open borders then, for meaning essentially we do away with an immigration system and what you describe as racist policies? Do we just have open borders and let anyone in that needs to come in? Or because this Canada is an occupying, colonizing force, do we all leave? I'm trying to figure out what your group believes, and I'm not trying to twist anything. Just help me out here.
Sure, and I'm having a conversation with you, but like I said, in order for us to have a conversation, we need to clarify the terms that are being used. So maybe if you could explain to me...
But I don't understand your terms. So I'm asking you, open borders or not?
Well, the question that I first have to clarify is, when you're creating a binary of letting them in and we, who are you saying is we and who is them? So if you could clarify that for me, then I'd be easier to be able to answer your question. Just because when it's we and they, they're very abstract terms, and so if you could define for me who they are.
There's people that live in Canada. There's people that live in Canada and people that don't. Right. Do we let anyone that wants to come to Canada in, or do we maintain an immigration system?
Well, this is what I'm saying, is that how did the people that are being granted citizenship, how are they being granted citizenship? Under what terms are they being granted citizenship? And how are these terms being defined? Where are the parameters coming from? And what are those parameters serving? So in order for us to have that question, like I said, we're starting from the position that Canada is occupied territory, and beyond that, it's hard to have a conversation about legality and illegality, because I don't recognize, and neither does no one is illegal, that the Canadian state is a legitimate entity.
You don't recognize that the Canadian state is a legitimate entity?
Yes, that's exactly what I just said.
Do you pay taxes? Do you take services from this illegitimate entity? Do you ride the bus? Do you use the library? Do you use the healthcare system of this illegitimate entity? Do you just take from it and not acknowledge it? Or what's the story here? Do you live completely outside the system? Because if you live in the system at all, you recognize that entity. And the only reason that you're allowed to come up with the crazy ideas that you have right here and expand on them in this society is because we come from the British tradition that allows for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and protection for minorities. I think you're well off base here. This is a country that let in 250,000 people last year, most of them from Southeast Asia, from Africa, from Latin America. How is that a racist immigration policy for this entity that you don't recognize?
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that these services happen because of the Canadian state. These services are happening and continue to happen because members of our community are the ones that are putting on the services. It's members of our community that are driving buses. It's members of our community that are selling food and growing our food. And oftentimes under extremely precarious situations where they're not only being exploited, but then they're also being told that they're not good for this country, that there's a we and them dichotomy, and that we and them dichotomy is being created through a white supremacist analysis that thinks and continues. And I would appreciate, again, if you would let me finish. I did not laugh at any of your comments.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry, that was a genuine reaction because you just said that this is a white supremacist society. Do you know what the #1 source for immigrants to this country is? The #1, the #2, the #3? None of them are white countries.
When I'm speaking of a white supremacist society, I'm talking about structures that are inherent in this system. What I'm talking about is the continual exploitation. You mentioned that we've let in 250,000 refugees. How many people are we complicit in displacing through our economic policies? How many people are we complicit in displacing because of our role in war? How many people are we complicit in displacing and have continued to displace on this occupied land? So if we're going to talk about that, let's also consider the other parameters that we need to look at. We can't just simply look at one side of the story being provided. And so that's where no one is illegal comes in. We believe that the power is not through politicians. We believe that power is in community. We believe that collective power comes from community coming together and demanding that every single person deserves dignity and respect and cannot be treated like an economic commodity.
All right. Ms. Kidane, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Wow.